Hey guys, Danny Johnson here. Today I wanted to make a video about the Terminator versus the 5.0 Coyote. They're both really good engines and they're actually pretty similar in performance, so I thought this would be a good video since, as you'll see, a lot of people have a pretty close and heated debate about the two. And anyway, just want to talk a little bit about the two engines for those who aren't as familiar with them, and just kind of talk about them. So basically with the Cobra, you have a 4.6 liter dual overhead cam engine, and it's built to be supercharged, and at the time Ford was using a very conservative compression ratio, so it was an 8.5 to 1 compression ratio. And if you want to learn more about that, I'll put a video in the link that kind of describes what a compression ratio is. But basically, when you have a supercharged or turbocharged car with forced induction, you want to have a lower compression ratio for safety. So anyway, there's the Cobra. Without the supercharger, you're talking a 300 horsepower engine, and with the supercharger, it responds really well to modifications. You're looking at stock, the car putting out about 420 horsepower, which is 360 at the wheels. And I know the car was rated at 390, but if you look at the dynos, when these cars, are dynoed bone stock, you'll see they're putting about 360 to 380 to the tire. So it's really a 420 horsepower engine. Ford had to be a bit conservative because they had just got sued on the 1999 Cobra when it didn't put out what they said. So anyway, you're looking at a 420 horsepower engine with a supercharger, and that's with a low compression ratio. So now on the other hand, you have the 5.0 Coyote. That engine came out in the Mustang in 2011, and it was the first time that they had designed an engine for the Mustang. Usually, it was basically Ford unrolling new technology like they did with the modular engine, came out in the Crown Vics, came out in all these other cars, and then found its way into the Mustang. But the 5.0 was designed specifically for the Mustang this time around. And what you're looking at is a 420 horsepower engine naturally aspirated, meaning no supercharger, no turbocharger. So you're getting basically identical horsepower numbers out of a supercharged 4.6 liter and a naturally aspirated 5.0. So the way they got that was a little bit more displacement, 5 liters instead of 4.6, some variable valve timing, but mostly it's because they raised the compression ratio. And they raised it to quite a high number for a naturally aspirated car. The Mach 1, for example, I guess you could start with the GTs of this era. They were in the 9.5 range. Then the Mach 1 was a 10 to 1 compression ratio car. Now you have the new 5.0 and it's 11 to 1. So that's a little bit higher. And then if you want to bring up the 5.2 Voodoo V8, that's now 12 to 1. So you're talking a really high compression ratio car, high engine. And so the thing about that is that's how you can get a lot of horsepower. However, it's very tempting these days to add boost to these cars. Ever since the Terminator basically was come out, it became very popular. I mean, obviously the positive displacement and centrifugal superchargers, turbochargers, they were all around. But ever since this car came out, it just kind of went crazy. People started doing it a lot more. And so anyhow, it's very common nowadays to find supercharger kits and everything for these cars. So what happens when you supercharge or turbocharge a new 5.0 Coyote? Well, the numbers you get are very impressive, and the reason why is because of that high compression ratio. However, that also means you have to be very careful when you're running bigger amounts of boost. So on one hand, you'll see a huge increase on power on low boost because of the compression ratio. And then on the other hand, you have to be very careful with that. So if you push the engines too much because of that high compression ratio, you have to be very careful running a high quality fuel, higher octane, something that's not going to pre-ignite now that you have so much more pressure in those cylinders. So numbers wise, the Cobra, so is it game over because you have a supercharged car that now makes the same amount of horsepower as the Coyote does naturally aspirated? Well, not exactly. The two cars are actually very similar. And it's that compression ratio that's kind of leveling the playing field. So for example, on the Terminators, in stock form, they're about 8 psi, and you're seeing 360 to the wheels. Okay, then when you change the pulley and go to 13 to 15 on the stock Eaton, you're going to see about 450 horsepower to the rear wheels. So you're going to see a significant jump. And on the Coyote, for example, you're going to get that same performance just doing bolt-ons. So you're talking headers, exhaust, intake, tune. You're going to be right with a pulleyed Terminator. Okay, so then what happens when you up the ante on the Terminator and you go with a twin screw or the new Roots VMP blower? You're going to see about 600 rear wheel horsepower, like my car here. And on the Coyote side, to get to that level, you'll also want to supercharge it. That's pretty much the only way to get to that same level other than nitrous. And so what you're seeing here is stock for stock. They both put 360 to 380 to the wheels. Pulleyed Cobra is about 450 rear wheel. Bolt-on Coyote, it's getting pretty close to that. Then you go aftermarket blower on the Terminator, 600 horsepower, on regular fuel, and with the Coyote, you put on their VMP, and you're going to have basically the same thing. So the two cars are actually very similar all the way up the performance line. The difference, however, is you're running a higher amount of boost out of the supercharger on the Terminator to get to that level, and you can't run that high of a boost level on the Coyote because of its compression ratio. Once again, you can, but you have to be very careful with what fuel selection that you have. So the two cars are actually very similar performance-wise. So now we kind of have to talk about the differences. If they're the same performance, then what's the difference between the two cars? Well, on one hand, you have an old Mustang. I mean, these cars they're getting older, and they're getting harder to find in lower mileage, condition where you can go over to the lot and just pick up a brand new 5.0. They're a dime a dozen. They're everywhere. So now you're starting to play a little bit of a price game. Now, the Terminators, on one hand, they're a great bargain for horsepower. On the other hand, they still demand a lot of money for a good car. So you're talking still 16 to 20,000 for a low-mile pulleyed car. You're still talking low 20s to mid 20s for an aftermarket blower car, and even into the $30,000 to $32,000 range for mint, pretty much not modded or highly modded conditioned Terminator. So they still hold their value, and that's because their performance is so good. On the other hand, the battle that the 5.0 faces is you're talking a brand new car. So what's going to happen? With the Terminator, it's already proven that it's going to hold its value. And I mean, the older the car gets, even at this stage now, it's just going to continue to hold its value if it's in good condition. Coyotes, you're talking buying a car for probably $10,000 to $15,000 more than this car, and then having that value completely depreciate. And that's just economics. You're talking a new car that's going to depreciate over an old car, which happens in this case to not depreciate very much if it's in good condition. So that's kind of the game that you're playing. So if you go numbers for numbers, what can you buy for $15,000? Well, now you can, the 2011 5.0s are a few years old, so they're starting to become a really good competition for the Terminator, because you're looking at a 2011 5.0 with 60 to 100,000 miles that you're going to be able to pick up for the same price as a pulleyed Cobra. And so you're pretty much on the same level right now with both of these cars with what modifications they have. So you're talking pulleyed Cobra or even stock Cobra versus a bolt-on or stock 5.0. They're both going to run about $15,000. You get into a twin screw car, you're going to be up into the 20s, and same with a 5.0 that also has an aftermarket blower on it. So, and then of course, if you go to a very mint condition, big turbo Terminator, then you're going to be up closer to 30,000. and you can compare that to a newer 5.0. Now, of course, on each of these scales, you can compete one with another. So if you have a budget of $20,000, then you're probably going to be able to go get a twin screw Cobra, and that might be a better deal than maybe a stock 5.0 or a bolt-on 5.0. So it's really all about preference. Now, the 5.0 is by far a more refined car. Okay, it's newer technology. Ford has really done a lot better over the last few years on their cars and quality, and a lot of people, it's a big deal. To me, it's really not. But inside, when you touch it, it's all soft and nice, and I really don't care because I don't rub my face against the dashboard all the time. So it's like, yeah, depending on what you're buying the car for, it's really just a matter of opinion at that stage. I actually like the way that you sit in the older Mustangs a lot better than the new 5.0s. I've driven the new 5.0s around, and they're big and wide, and I don't like the way the shifter's in place. It's like you're sitting in a big Dodge Charger, where these cars, it's like being in the cockpit of an F-16. They're tight, they're all around you, you feel like you're in control. Okay, now something that also comes up is how the car drives. The 5.0, being that it's so refined and so smooth, it's more on the Cadillac side, I guess you'd say, where it's a smooth car, and you don't feel the brute force that you feel when you're in the Terminator. Okay, I've driven both, and the 5.0, I've even raced my friend's 5.0 down the track, and the way that it felt was just like my Mach 1. Okay, like a naturally aspirated 300 horsepower car. Okay, you don't really tell that it's 500, 400 horsepower until you're doing really well in a race or getting good track results. I mean, it's that smooth. So there's that to think about. Also, as we mentioned, there's an older car versus a brand new car, so you have warranties. Okay, so you have a brand new. If you're not mechanically inclined, your best bet is probably go out and get a 5.0. It's going to be a good, reliable car. If you keep it all motor and don't supercharge it, then it's actually going to hold up pretty well. You can beat on it and pretty much be fine. On the Terminators, you got to be a little bit of a mechanic. The main things that you're going to deal with are alternators. Their placement of them is right next to the exhaust, so they overheat. The way that when you change around the lower crank pulley on the Terminator, if you're going for more boost, you're going to spin the alternator faster and risk burning it up unless you have a good aftermarket one. I mean, you have intercooler pumps that are going to fail. A few more components. It's really not that much, but it's enough that if you just go buy the car and you don't know how to turn a wrench at all, it's going to be trouble for you. However, if you watch my channel, for example, I have anything that you really need to do on the Terminator. My videos show you how to do it, and it's really not that bad. So, still a price game. It's depending on, do you want something that's brand new? Do you want something, that's going to depreciate, because you have to consider that as well. And what are you going to do with the car? I have a Mach 1 that I daily drive, so this car here sees about 1,000 miles a year. I drive it on the weekends. I enjoy it in that way. It's a fun, great car, but it's gonna, the mileage is gonna stay low for that reason. And for those who say you have to drive it, it's built to be driven, well, that's why I have my Mach 1. I drive that every day, and this is a different setup for me, and that's what I want to do with the car. And every time I drive this, it's a new experience. Okay, no matter what you do, when you buy a car as a daily, you're going to get used to that car no matter what it is. So you have to consider that too. But basically, you're just asking yourself, are you out looking to get something financed? It's harder and harder to finance these Terminators. When somebody's still asking $16,000 to $20,000, that's pretty close to what the bank is loaning on them. And so if you're getting a nicer car, a lot of times you have to pay a little bit out of pocket for it, especially the older that they get. However, on the other side, you'll be able to easily finance a brand new $40,000 5.0, but you're paying almost twice as much. So in a lot of ways, the cars are similar performance-wise. You could buy one or the other and be pretty much in the same boat for different reasons. But anyway, the basic point I wanted to make out of the video, if you take anything away from it, is that what you have here is an older technology engine that, because of its fully built rotating assembly, you know, the layout that it has, it still puts out a lot of power. It's still a good bang for the buck. Terminators are very sought after cars. They always will be. Okay, everybody's going to talk about how they want a Terminator. On the other hand, you have 5.0. It's a newer car. It has new technology. It puts performance in pretty much the same realm. Stock for stock, bolt-on for pulleyed, aftermarket blower for aftermarket blower, and you're going to be spending the same amount of money for the most part, except for the 5.0's higher, you know, overall purchase price, depending on if you buy it brand new or used. But all in all, 5.0 is a great engine. I'm glad to see that Ford is putting out good engines like that one in the 5.2 Voodoo V8. Great cars. There's nothing wrong with them. Terminator, this is probably the only car from this age era that's really going to be top for top competition to the new 5.0. The 2-valve Mustangs, you can, like my brother has, you can do a built bottom end and a Torque Tech Eaton kit on it and be 450 horsepower, and you know, great car for a low price. But then you're just starting out at what the 5.0 comes from the showroom. So all in all, the 5.0 is a great new engine, a lot of technology behind it, higher compression, so you got to be careful if you're going to end up supercharging or turbocharging that engine. Make sure you're running good fuel in it, and once you get into that realm, reliability and everything, it's going to be about the same as the Terminator. When you put an aftermarket blower on and you're cutting into the front timing cover and, you know, installing everything that comes, you know, the intercooler pumps and everything else that comes with a supercharger kit, you know, you're in the same boat as a Terminator. So it all depends on preference, what you're going to do with the car. Are you going to daily drive it? Are you going to keep it forever? Are you going to keep it in show condition and drive it on the weekends? Is it going to be your daily? So it really just depends. But all in all, that's where we're sitting in today's technology. So hope you like this video. I'm sure I forgot a lot about it. Put it in the comments what I forgot to say, and you know, just know they're both really good cars. It is really a personality thing. What car do you like better? And you know, a little bit of, you have an older car, are you going to be willing to work on it a little bit more? So anyway, that's my opinion about the 5.0 versus the Terminator. I think they're both great cars. I think they're actually very evenly matched on performance levels. And so anyway, to me, I'd rather have a Terminator any day. I'd rather have something that's rare, something that's, you know, more of a collector item as it gets older, rather than a depreciating asset that just kind of is going to diminish to be, you know, everyday GT that you find on the street. So anyway, put in the comments if you have any other questions, or if you have any other comments or point of views that maybe I didn't cover. Thanks for watching, guys.